When John Saxon passed away, his family thought they knew what to expect: a $1.5 million estate, movie royalties, and a valuable pension. But within weeks, everything changed. His son found bank statements that didn't make sense. Money was missing. Personal items were being sold. His wife had been moving funds while he was dying. The court documents reveal a family secret so devastating it destroyed decades of relationships. The real story behind Saxon's fortune is darker than any horror movie he ever made. John Saxon began life far from movie sets and bright lights. He was born as Carmine Orico on 5th August in working-class Brooklyn, where cramped Bensonhurst apartments held big families and the streets sounded more like Italian than English. His father, Antonio, worked long hours on the New York docks, and his mother, Anna Protettore, had come all the way from Calabria. Even his birth year confused people later in life. Some books said 1935, others said 1936, so his true age always floated between those numbers. Nothing about his early days looked glamorous, yet this boy from a dockworker's home would one day be renamed by a powerful agent and turned into someone the studios could sell as a star. People sometimes talk about him almost dying from pneumonia as a child and being moved upstate, but the sources that matter never confirm that. What is certain is that pneumonia ended his life on 25 July 2020 in Murfreesboro, 11 days before what would have been his 84th birthday on 5th August. The moment felt strange to many who had watched him fight on screen for 60 years. He trained in Shotokan karate and judo from the late 1950s and performed falls and fights in one action film after another. His tough image made his quiet hospital passing feel fragile in a way that caught fans off guard. His connection to performing started slowly. There is no exact record of him acting in school plays at 10, but movies were already shaping him through his teenage years. He spent time in neighborhood cinemas, where he sat quietly in the dark, watching stories larger than anything in Bensonhurst. One day, a modeling scout noticed him while he was simply sitting in a theater seat. Soon, he was posing for romance and detective magazines, sometimes playing wounded street kids for staged photo shoots. One picture showed him as a Puerto Rican tough collapsing over a trash can. That single image reached Hollywood and caught the eye of Henry Wilson, a man known for discovering young faces and turning them into marketable names. Wilson found the Orico family, spoke to his parents, and signed the 17-year-old. Almost overnight, the quiet Brooklyn boy who used to watch crime films became the face on those covers. Life at home had already taught him hardness. His father worked on the docks, where danger, layoffs, and strikes were part of everyday talk. Families never knew when an injury or shutdown would wipe out their savings, and that tension sat in the background of Carmine's childhood. Years later, when he played stressed cops, crooked officials, and desperate working-class men, it looked natural, almost like he was drawing from something he had already lived. Writers often said he gravitated toward tough roles, and his own comments about Brooklyn suggested that those early pressures never really left him. He did not drop out of school, despite rumors. He studied at New Utrecht High School and graduated in 1953. During those years, he picked up small jobs, even working at an archery concession on Coney Island, while modeling on the side. His magazine covers spread fast, and one of them ended up in front of Henry Wilson. Soon, the 16 or 17-year-old was on his way to California. There he became John Saxon, a name handed to him by Wilson without much debate. Universal signed him in April 1954 for $150 a week, which was a huge change for a dock worker's son. Before long, he was studying acting with Stella Adler, learning the craft behind the image the studio was building. That first big shift came from a single detective magazine. Wilson had spotted the young man as he fell over a garbage can in a fake crime scene. Once he met the family, he flew the teenager to Hollywood and pushed him into the studio system. By April 1954, Universal was already paying him $150 weekly, more money than he had ever imagined at that age. He became a studio property, dressed, coached, and photographed exactly how they wanted. It happened fast. Within 2 years, the kid from Brooklyn sidewalks was walking onto Universal sound stages as a rising young discovery. Losing his old name was part of the process. In 1954 and 1955, almost the moment he signed with Wilson, Carmine Aurico became John Saxon. Hollywood thought an Italian name would limit him, so Wilson replaced it with something clean and easy for marketing. Studio documents from that year show the new identity already in use. Saxon later said he had almost no choice. If he wanted a career, this was the path. Within 1 year, he was no longer the boy from Bensonhurst. He was the young star Universal hoped to shape into a teen favorite. His earliest screen work came quickly. In 1954, he appeared in the TV drama Medic, learning how to move on a set and hit his marks under pressure. Universal soon pushed him into delinquent roles, using his sharp eyes and athletic look to sell troubled youth stories. Running Wild in 1955 gave him one of his first strong showings. The Unguarded Moment in 1956 pushed him deeper. He played a student who seemed to be stalking his teacher, a dark part for a 19-year-old. Critics noticed his simmering presence, and Universal saw something real, something more than a handsome face. Then came Rock, Pretty Baby, in 1956. The movie cost little, but it captured the spirit of teenage rebellion. Saxon played Jimmy Daly, a senior who wanted music instead of college. The fans loved it. Universal made a sequel called Summer Love in 1958, and the studio said he was receiving around 3,000 fan letters every week. He was no longer a contract kid. He was a teen idol. Producers kept finding new places to use him, including a melodrama later titled The Restless Years, where he acted alongside Sandra Dee. By 1958, the studio wanted him to move beyond teen material. This happy feeling placed him opposite Debbie Reynolds in a full romantic lead. Reviews described him as a junior Marlon Brando, which showed how studios wanted him to appear. That same year, he also filmed The Reluctant Debutante for MGM, set in London during the 1958 court debutante season. It was elegant, colorful, and polished, and it became a hit in Britain. Suddenly, he was no longer a rebellious youth. He was a charming young gentleman fit for high society stories. Then, in 1959, he stepped into something entirely different. The Big Fisherman was a biblical epic based on a novel nearly 600 pages long. He wore ancient robes, acted beside Howard Keel, and stood on sets built to feel grand and sacred. For fans who knew him as a modern heartthrob, seeing him inside a religious drama felt like a shock. Studios were testing him. They wanted to know if he could carry weighty material or if he belonged only in lighter romances. Around the same time, people later said he passed on a role in Gidget. The story does not appear in firm studio records, but it fits the pattern of his choices. He seemed restless, always drawn to darker or more serious parts instead of sunny comedies. By 1959, his workload was intense. Some sources list around 5 film releases that year. While filming The Big Fisherman, he was also stepping into grittier crime material. In one film from that period, he played a beatnik writer tied to a story involving sexual violence, which was bold and risky for the time. In 1960, John Saxon was 25 and already stepping into something fierce. He played Rondo in The Plunderers, the most vicious of 4 young cowboys who drift into Trail City and begin terrorizing the place. People later said the movie felt like a rebel without a cause story set in the West, because the gang looked less like fearless outlaws and more like scared boys hiding behind cruelty. Reviewers called Saxon a diabolical Mexican with sharp eyebrows and the only one old enough to shave. That look made him dangerous the second he walked on screen. The story pushed everything toward one grim moment. Rondo attacks Ellie, then charges at Sam with a knife inside a stable. She shoots him in the back as he lunges forward. It was brutal, and it locked Saxon into the image of someone who could throw himself into physical, fearless roles. It also happened to be Jeff Chandler's final Western, which added another layer of weight to the film. But confusion often grows around an actor's early career. Some lists claim Saxon acted in Blood of the Vampire in 1961, but his official filmography never includes it. When you check the years around that time, you only find The Plunderers in 1960, Posse from Hell in 1961, War Hunt in 1962, and the family comedy Mr. Hobbs Takes a Vacation in that same year. Even later summaries of his Western work mention those titles again, with no sign of Blood of the Vampire anywhere. That missing credit shows how easy it is for a false role to slip in and then get copied for years, unless someone looks at studio records and real release dates. Then, everything changed again. In 1962, Saxon appeared in Mr. Hobbs Takes a Vacation with James Stewart and Maureen O'Hara. This time, he stepped straight into clean domestic comedy. Stewart played Roger Hobbs, a tired banker whose wife drags their complicated family to a rundown beach house. Saxon played Ed Landers, a polished young teacher who planned to marry Hobbs's shy daughter. His scenes showed a new kind of tension between strict parents and a more confident youth culture that was starting to take shape. Critics later said the movie sat right on the line between the soft humor of the 1950s and the sharper tone of the 1960s. For Saxon, it proved something important. In just 2 years, he could move from violent Western punk in The Plunderers to charming romantic support in a bright Hollywood comedy. By 1963, he was taking another step. Otto Preminger cast him in The Cardinal, a sweeping drama about a young priest facing racism, fascism, and political pressure as he rises through the Catholic world. Saxon's role was supporting, but being invited into a Preminger production mattered. Preminger chose his casts with precision and expected his actors to hold their ground in long, serious scenes. Saxon was already known for tough, intense parts in westerns and war pictures, so standing inside a 3-hour drama without fading beside veteran leads showed that studios saw something steadier in him. That move toward darker and more psychological work continued in 1964 with The Cavern. Edgar G. Ulmer directed it, and historians point out that Ulmer's later films often trapped people in tight spaces, where fear, greed, and love rubbed against each other. The Cavern followed the same idea. A small group of people were sealed underground during a war, while their alliances broke apart under stress. It was a different kind of tension, far from gunfights or light family jokes. It also marked Saxon's deeper step into international filmmaking, since his early 1960s credits show American work mixing with European productions. When you place The Cavern next to his westerns and comedies, you can see how quickly he shifted into heavier material by the middle of the decade. By the late 1960s, that shift pushed him toward Europe again. Italian and Spanish studios were shooting dozens of westerns every year. These were the spaghetti westerns, filmed in the harsh lands of Almeria, which often stood in for the American Southwest. Production moved fast. Some movies wrapped in 4 to 6 weeks. Then different language tracks were dubbed for separate markets. Many American actors went there hoping the boom would open new doors, and Saxon was one of them. Even though some titles from that period are blurry in today's records, the move itself showed how willing he was to follow the work wherever it went. Then came Death of a Gunfighter in 1969, a film remembered less for its story and more for what happened behind the camera. Robert Totten started as director but was fired partway through. Don Siegel finished the movie, but neither man wanted sole credit. Hollywood had no rule for that kind of situation. So the film was released under a new name, Alan Smithee, the first widely known use of that Directors Guild pseudonym for a film nobody wanted to claim. The scandal overshadowed the cast. It nearly buried the movie despite some good reviews. Moments like that could make studios nervous about everyone connected to the project. Saxon carried that mark with him whether he wanted it or not. Later in 1969, he appeared in The Gladiators, a Swedish film directed by Peter Watkins. It was part science fiction and part anti-war experiment. The story imagined a future where countries settled conflicts by sending soldiers into televised war games. The film mixed languages and focused on a large ensemble rather than heroic leads. Most summaries today place it beside Watkins' earlier works like Culloden and The War Game, rather than beside any European westerns. There is no real evidence that Saxon filmed improvised torture-resistant scenes there, even though such stories have drifted around fan circles. Reliable sources never mention them. A few years later, his life took another turn. He was nearly 38 when filming began for Enter the Dragon in 1973. He had not trained seriously in martial arts for 4 years, so he went through 3 months of intense work with Bruce Lee in Hong Kong. Lee taught him how to move like a fighter and how to think like one. Saxon said the only fight scene not choreographed by Lee was the golf course moment when Roper beats several men who want money from him. That fight pushed his character straight toward Hong Kong and the island tournament. Everything else came from Lee's eye, his precision, and his demand for perfect timing. Saxon tried to match it, even though he knew nobody could copy Lee's speed. By the end of filming, he looked convincing, and that alone was a victory. He never forgot the training. One day, Bruce Lee demonstrated his 1-inch punch on him. Saxon said Lee warned him each time, yet the strike still bruised his ribs and shocked him with its power. That small movement carried strength most actors had never felt. It taught Saxon to stay alert and present in every moment, because Lee expected full attention. The lesson stayed with him long after Enter the Dragon. After that film, Saxon's fame rose quickly. In 1974, he appeared as Lieutenant Frank Hawkins in Black Christmas, a horror movie that later became a cult classic. One of the most remembered scenes came from a phone booth moment that he partly improvised. His character was trying to track down the killer while hearing disturbing voices over the line. Nick Mancuso and others created the noises, sometimes speaking in strange positions to make the sound even creepier. But the fear on Saxon's face came straight from him. Director Bob Clark let him push the moment further, and that choice turned the scene into one of the movie's strongest moments. It also showed how Saxon could lift even a simple setup into something alive and unforgettable. John Saxon's time as Lady Donald Thompson in A Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984 came at a moment when horror was shifting into something new. He stepped into the role as Nancy Thompson's father, the tough man who wanted to protect his daughter even when he could not understand the horror she was facing. The film's idea was already strange and exciting. Teenagers were being hunted inside their own dreams, and the way Saxon moved through those scenes made everything feel even more unreal. One of the wildest moments came when he faced Freddy in a dream sequence with a shotgun in his hands. That blast was never supposed to happen. Saxon fired it on instinct, wanting to push the moment a little further, and the pyrotechnics misfired. The explosion burned his hair and shook the whole set. People around him froze because they thought something had gone very wrong. In a way it had, but the raw shock on his face ended up helping the scene. That moment became famous in horror circles, and documentaries still bring it up as the kind of accident that somehow lifted the movie's tension without anyone planning it. The story behind the shot became even more surprising the more people talked about it. Saxon had asked for the blast because he wanted to raise the stakes of the scene. The effects team agreed, but the rig did not behave the way it was supposed to. The fireball forced the crew to shut everything down for a while. Even so, the final cut kept most of that real fear. Saxon later laughed about it, saying the shock you see on screen is exactly what he felt. That kind of honesty is hard to fake, and fans still see that scene as a turning point in how real the danger felt in the movie. When Saxon came back in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 in 1987, things felt different. He had expected a bigger role at first, but the budget was only $3.2 million, and the studio chose to spend most of it on younger cast members and special effects. His part shrank, and that caused problems on set. Saxon and Wes Craven clashed over the script changes, and Saxon did not hold back in interviews. He said the studio was ignoring the heart of the story and pushing him to the side. It became one of those behind-the-scenes arguments that showed how horror was changing and how veteran actors sometimes felt the strain when franchises shifted focus. Even outside Elm Street, Saxon's career had its own battles. In The Return of the Living Dead in 1985, he played Captain Harris and spent long days covered in heavy latex makeup. The chemicals were rough on his skin. They burned, they itched, and they caused reactions that lasted for weeks. He stood for hours in that gear, sweating under lights and pushing through scenes because he wanted the performance to look real. The pain stayed with him long after the shoot ended, but that effort helped turn the movie into a cult favorite. Fans still admire how committed he was, even when the makeup made it hard to breathe. Then there was the residuals controversy. In 1988, Saxon told interviewers that he and some of the original Elm Street actors were barely getting paid for the huge success of the movies. His comments stirred anger within the cast and the studio. Some people felt he should not have brought it up. Others said he was right to speak out. The whole thing became a reminder of how much money can sit behind a horror franchise, and how little sometimes reaches the people who helped build it. Saxon's reach went beyond horror. In 1983, he showed up in the A-Team in an episode called Children of Jamestown. He played a cult leader named Martin James, who went up against Hannibal, Face, Amy, and Mr. T. The episode aired on January 17, 1983, and had more grit than usual. Saxon choreographed many of his own fights and worked closely with Mr. T to nail the physical moments. The tension between them made the episode stand out, and fans still see it as one of the strongest from the first season. He also spent 3 years giving life to Gotham's underworld. Between 1992 and 1995, he voiced mob bosses in 12 episodes of Batman the Animated Series. His rough, smoky voice made those characters feel dangerous in a very quiet way. People praised his work because even small roles felt heavy and real. Some critics even said his voice work deserved awards. It showed how much depth he could bring without even appearing on screen. His work in From Dusk Till Dawn in 1996 added another wild story to his career. He played Stanley Chase, a family man trapped in a vampire nightmare. The chainsaw scene he shot with the crew took 20 takes. It was the very first day of filming, and the pressure was already high. He wore padding and a prosthetic, while the team tried to time the shots just right. It was sweaty, loud, and risky, but the final moment became one of the most memorable in the movie. The film premiered on January 17, 1996, at the Cinerama Dome, and that scene alone helped cement his status as a genre icon. Between 1988 and 1990, Saxon also stepped into the world of Falcon Crest as Dr. James Hobart. The show loved wild twists, and the storyline that shook everyone came in 1989 when his character faked his own death. Viewers talked about it for weeks. It was dramatic, It was ridiculous, and it became a highlight of the show. Saxon handled the soap's style with ease, proving again that he could move between genres without losing control of his performance. In the 2000s, he leaned into mentorship. In 2002's The Ghost of the Hamptons, he shared stories with younger actors about his early years, including tales from his time on Dragon sets. They looked up to him because he treated them seriously and helped them understand the craft from the inside. Around that time, he had to turn down a major role on The Sopranos because of health issues. It could have pushed him into a new wave of fame, but he chose to protect his well-being instead. It was a quiet but powerful choice, showing the weight of a long career. His personal life had just as many turns. He married Marianne Saxon in 1967, and their son Antonio arrived that same year. By 1978, filming demands kept pulling him away. He missed birthdays and school events, something he later admitted with regret. Their marriage fell apart that same year, and the custody battle that followed revealed how far work had pulled him from home. The divorce was final in 1979, and Marianne handled most of Antonio's care while Saxon kept traveling for films. His second marriage to Elizabeth Saxon started in 1987. She helped manage his career and handled contracts. But in 1992, it fell apart. A year later, her memoir exposed an affair she discovered between Saxon and a young extra from the Elm Street set. She found letters and personal items that made the situation clear. The memoir caused a stir in Hollywood and marked a painful shift in how people saw him. His third marriage came later in 2008 when he married Gloria Martell. At first it looked peaceful and steady, yet tension soon grew between Gloria and Saxon's family. Antonio later filed claims saying Gloria's presence changed how the family handled inheritance and property. After Saxon's death in 2020, those tensions grew into a legal fight. The documents described disagreements over wills, trusts, and who should receive what. It became a long and emotional battle that revealed how deep the family cracks ran. Saxon's health struggles also shaped his later years. He fought prostate cancer in 2000 and needed major abdominal surgery. The recovery took a full year and paused his career. After that, he acknowledged he had emphysema from years of smoking. He smoked up to 3 packs a day for much of his life. He eventually quit, but the damage stayed. Doctors said both illnesses weakened him and made him vulnerable. When he passed away on July 25, 2020, at age 83 in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, pneumonia complications were the final cause. Records showed he died at home with Gloria beside him, while Antonio stayed distant because of old disagreements. After his death, his $1.5 million estate became the center of another fight. Antonio accused Gloria of withdrawing more than $100,000 from accounts between 2019 and 2020. The estate included royalties from Enter the Dragon and Elm Street, and a $300,000 annual SAG-AFTRA pension. The case stretched into 2021. The final settlement gave 60% of the assets to Gloria and 40% to Antonio. Even so, the legal struggle added more weight to a family already hurt by long years of mistrust. One moment that upset Antonio deeply came when Gloria sold Saxon's personal script collection for $50,000. Those scripts were treasured items from his biggest films. Antonio said it felt like losing a part of his father all over again. The sale became one more spark in the fire, pushing the lawsuit forward and exposing more pain between them. The pension itself became a symbol of the divide. It was steady, it was valuable, and it represented his long career. Both sides wanted it, and both believed they deserved control. The fight showed how money can twist bonds that once felt unbreakable. Even with the drama, his legacy stayed strong. With more than 200 credits behind him, he influenced a generation of actors. Keanu Reeves once said, "Enter the Dragon helped shape him as a performer." After Saxon died, his ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean, a quiet farewell that matched his own wishes. In the end, fans remembered the impact he left on martial arts films, horror classics, television, and animation. His work lived on, even as the story of his final years carried its own kind of heaviness.